Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambremont Webre, and I have the great privilege today to be with Chris Burres, who is a scientist and is the founder and CEO of C60EVO.com, producing ESS60, which is something that I take a teaspoon of every day in the morning, especially now during what I call the pandemic. Others call the pandemic. There are various names for it. And Chris, I want to ask you this. We're now a number of months. Today's September 24th, 2020. And so we're about 9 months officially into a process that, unofficially started on October 18th, 2019, the first day of Event 201, which was set out in the Rockefeller Report of 2010, which was, we won't get into that. What do you find are the reasons that most of the consumers that you encounter are continuing to take ESS60, C60EVO.com, ESS60 at this time during the special conditions of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, first, Alfred, thank you so much for having me. I love being on your podcast. You ask great questions, and then we dive right into some really cool stuff. I can tell you, right, so from the perspective of C60 Evo, when really everything went into lockdown, we were very concerned about sales. I think that was true of, certainly restaurants, they just shut down, entertainment shut down, travel shut down, and we were very concerned about what might happen to our sales. And we've actually been, I would say, relatively unaffected. I think what our customers, I was actually on an interesting call today with an Amazon marketing group, and they were talking about that our product actually has a 68% repurchase rate. Right? So 68% of the customers who ever purchase one bottle from us actually purchase another additional bottle from us. The typical, we'll say C60 company out there, they said, has a 23% repurchase rate. So I think that goes to just the quality of the product that we have on the market. So we were worried that the sales would go down. And ultimately what we found, I think those customers that are with us, they're taking advantage of the discounts that they can get on subscription. They just have this understanding. And I think, maybe you can share some of your perspective that this is the time when we need to be protecting our immune system. This is the time when we want our immune system balanced and operating at peak performance. And the product, actually C60 Evo product, our most recommended blend is the olive oil version. We do sell avocado, we do sell MCT, but you want that olive oil version has a number of factors that help support your immune system. So one is it's an antioxidant, and there's at least one study that shows it to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. You got to be really careful here in the States with the anti-inflammatories. So the best thing to say is that it fits perfectly in an anti-inflammatory diet. That diet is associated with a group of people who have reduced incidences of stroke and reduced incidence of heart attack, and actually just live longer, which kind of supports the original study. So known antiviral, known antibacterial, and our most consistent report is that people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. And I think as you kind of unwrap this piece about sleeping better, as a society, we talk about sleep and we say sleep is important. And we know that sleep is good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. We know this. And we believe that you should absolutely get sleep. And as a society, we say, unless there's something else to do. And we're the only species on the planet that will actually forego sleep for no valid reason. Every other species that's going to miss sleep is because they're running from a predator or they're trying to find food. Like, that's the only valuable, healthful reason to miss sleep. So our customers who are reporting better sleep, think about that. That's helping their mental, physical, and emotional well-being. There's a lot of people. I remember I've got a good friend of mine who's a human behavior expert, and I was on the way home from a kind of long day at work, and I was just kind of surprisingly sharing with him, I'm just tired today. I'm like kind of exhausted today. And he goes, well, you do realize that there's a pandemic or a pandemic going on, and that most people aren't sleeping the way that they used to sleep. And I think that's probably true, except for most of our customers seem to be happy, seem to be continuing with their subscriptions, and seem to mirror the data that Amazon shared with me today.
Right, right. Um, so
You know,
one
and I
of
haven't had my shot. And I'm going to take. It's been a busy day actually, and whenever I have
yeah,
a busy day, I like to take an extra shot. So let me find my 5 ml mark. That is what is recommended. Now, a lot of our customers, that's 1 teaspoon. A lot of our customers will tell us, will tell us that if they take it too late in the day,
uh-huh.
that'll keep them up. And I don't know if that's been your experience. That's not my case. That's not how it works for me. But I'm also not a good test case because I can drink a cup of coffee and go right to sleep. So I'm not, I don't have a challenge with sleep.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, one of the functions that we've done here from the social science point of view, because our background is that, among other things, we have a community health certificate from the Harvard School of Public Health. So we've been doing an examination of most of the regulations in various jurisdictions, both in North America, in Europe, and other parts of the world, the social control regulations, social distancing, lockdowns, vaccination regulations around the pandemic. And it looks like people are saying, oh, we're going to go into a second lockdown. There's a lot of dispute around that. And I'm going to the issue of the immune system here, because the immune system that they talk about, it's not only the reported virus, the coronavirus, because there's been no proof that the COVID-19 virus exists. There is no scientific proof whatsoever. If you want to be really strict about it, there's been no scientific proof whatsoever. And most of the studies show that the masking regulations, the lockdown regulations, the social distancing regulations, all of these over the long run tend to wear down the immune systems of humans and really wear them down. So what you want is something that is going to boost your immune system, not only boost your immune system against the so-called virus, but against the so-called social control methods that these various health authorities are regulating against humanity. And that's the point that I want to highlight here. See, this has nothing to do with the FDA, but rather what just being cooped up in an apartment all day long where you can't go out except to buy food or to exercise. I'm just repeating exactly what some regulations in some jurisdictions say. Walking around with a mask on your face all day long, what that does to an individual. There are doctors that show that this actually wears down the immune system. You know, these are just statements that I'm making based on regulations that I've said. So I'm not putting you to the test to have to repeat this, but I'm just saying that why it's so important to keep one's immune system boosted during these times, just to get through the social control methods that the authorities are doing. And I wondered if you could really give us a discourse as to why ESS60, C60evo.com boosts our immune system and why that's so important. How does this happen? How does this miracle take place?
Yeah, well, I think one, I want to kind of co-sign some of what you said. It would be very hard to argue that all the measures that have been taken haven't taken a toll on everybody, right? And that's kind of the reason when I was having that conversation with my friend, and I'm like, hey, I'm feeling a little run down today, and he's like, everybody's feeling a little bit run down. It's not just okay. So one, people have lost jobs. People, like everybody has lost at minimum something, whether it's that you go to a job and now you're working from home, because that's something. Like people may go like, well, you still have a job, but if you really enjoyed going to work, that even that process, maybe you hated your commute, but like just having that transition of zones can be a positive thing for you. And now that's taken away. At a minimum, you just no longer have control of it. What's been taken away from you is some sense of control. There's even some people who, I've got a friend who really like loves to do art. And now that she's locked up at her apartment, she's doing art and kind of loves what's happening, and then feels guilty about everybody else struggling and the fact that she loves the position that she's in right now. And so everybody's feeling stress. Absolutely. And there's even just some kind of interesting stuff that I've read that I could share. Is there's some work that's showing, there's a fascinating podcast that I listened to. It was Radio Lab is the podcast. And what they were talking about was that there was a particular organizer of homeless groups in a major city. I don't remember the city off the top of my head. And when kind of COVID was coming out and everybody was concerned, if you look at what it's supposed to, like what's prescribed to you in order to protect yourself from it, stay out of groups, stay in clean places, wash your hands regularly. Well, that's the antithesis of what a homeless person is able to do. So this organizer was just waiting for his entire a homeless population to come down with COVID, and a certain percentage of them to be dying, and all of these horrible things, and it never happened. And then another week went by and it never happened. And then another week went by and it never happened. And then finally enough tests became available that he was able to test his population. And like 82% of them tested positive for COVID. So that's, we could debate that, but 82% of them had what is supposed to be COVID, and none of them showed any symptoms. And he actually, of course, is in contact with other kind of homeless population supervisors or whatever, people who are kind of in charge, whether at a charity level, governmental level, and they all had the same thing. This is really interesting. So if what we've heard already is true, what is the difference? And one of the theories, at least that was brought forth in this podcast, what is related to vitamin D. And actually, vitamin D is a great cytokine storm inhibitor. So a cytokine storm is, the way that I've come to understand it, is in your body, you've got this first line of defense, right? So this virus comes in, you've got this first line of defense, and you've got kind of snipers that are ready to take out these viruses. But when the viruses actually reach a critical mass, then your system kind of throws in round two, and round two is like machine guns and flamethrowers, right? And so they actually end up doing collateral damage to your actual healthy cells while they're trying to defend you, right? That's the cytokine storm. And vitamin D is very well known to be a cytokine storm suppressor. It actually suppresses your immune system so that it's not doing damage to your healthy cells. So just throw that out because I think it's fascinating. Go listen to that Radio Lab podcast and make sure you're getting your vitamin D, because there's nothing wrong with getting vitamin D. Make sure you're getting your vitamin D. Now you talk about what are the ramifications. Let's talk a little bit about the studies that are behind the ESS60 molecule and what impact they could potentially have on what we're going through. So the original study was published in 2012, and it was originally supposed to be a toxicity study. They thought for various reasons that the ESS60 molecule would be toxic. So they did this toxicity study. They gave rats water, rats olive oil, and then rats olive oil with ESS60 in it. instead of being toxic, those rats, given it's the C60 Evo formula, lived 90% longer than the control group, and they died without tumors. Now, I think I have very little doubt. I don't know, in general, there should be very little doubt that something that has the potential to have mammals live 90% longer, peer-reviewed published research, probably has the potential to help us live healthier. I always kind of joke that those rats in the study, there weren't notes about that particular publication that said the rats were, walking around with little walkers. They weren't dragging little oxygen tanks around with them. They lived healthy rat lives until they died. So it kind of makes sense that it actually protected. A typical Worcester rat is known to have tumors, and the amount of tumors that it has is proportional to how long it lives. The longer that a Worcester rat lives, the more tumor mass it has in its body. So the typical Worcester rat dies at 32 months. The C60 Evo rat lives out to 62 months and dies, instead of with a known amount of tumors that's proportional to how long they lived, they died with no tumors, right? So that's a pretty remarkable result. So you've got these rats, they lived a healthy life that was almost twice as long as the regular Worcester rat. You look at the fact that it's an antioxidant, the fact that it fits in an anti-inflammatory diet, antiviral properties, antibacterial properties, and again, like, we could almost rest our entire hat on better sleep. I don't know what impact it's had on your sleep, but I know it's impacted my sleep and the sleep of thousands of our customers.
Right. Well, I find that in terms of my own schedule and the multitasking that I'm doing, which is on the one hand organizing a treaty conference of 118 nations that people can see at peaceandspace.org, that's quite a multitask.
Yeah.
And I can, continue to handle that because of the extra focus that I'm given by this. Do people come to you, and what about the life extension properties? Is that something that people are drawn to, or is that an experimental thing, or is that like a science fiction thing? How do people react to that?
So it's an interesting thing if you think about it from a business perspective, right? So how are we going to get this product out there? Let me first talk about when people first started taking this. So this study was published in 2012. Mid 2013, we actually started getting a lot of phone calls saying, hey, how much in a dose? At the time, I'm a carbon nanomaterial scientist, and we sell this to people to put in tires, scientists, to put in tires and inks and batteries and solar cells. So our first reaction when people were like, hey, how much in a dose, was, hey, you don't put this in your body. Like, you put it in tires and ink and batteries and solar cells. Like, in general, those are things, like, if you put them in those things, you probably don't put them in human bodies. Now, the literature was very clear, right? So carbon 60 is for industrial applications. There's peer-reviewed published research that shows it's harmful. ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for safer human consumption. So anything that looked like ESS60 was shown to be safe. But we're scientists, and scientists move slow and conservatively and with a lot of skepticism. And so in middle 2013, we actually added not for human consumption to our labeling. Now, we continued to sell the ESS60 molecule dissolved in olive oil, and it was under the auspices that people would buy it and do their own rat study, or maybe they wanted to study some other animal. What happened actually from really about mid-2013 all the way through the end of 2017 is people were, buying it for research purposes only, and then calling us and saying, my dad had this fabulous result. My mom is doing so much better. I didn't trust her to drive, and now I trust her to drive because of the improvements in her health. And all these testimonials are coming in, and we're like, well, look, you're really not supposed to be taking it. It really is for research purposes only. Again, the literature didn't, supported that it was safe. In 2017, actually, Patty was a big driver in getting awareness of this product out there. And really kind of the industry sold out, and everybody except for us, because we're the largest manufacturer and distributor of ESS60 on the planet. And so going into 2018, I'm like, all right, what are we going to do with this? And that's really kind of the part of the story where C60 Evo was born, and now we're here talking about it. So in the early days, when this product was first sold, I like to tell the story for this reason. When it was first sold, people were buying it because they were aware of this rat study. They were aware that the rats lived longer and died without tumors. So they really didn't have any preconceived notions about what they might experience immediately when they started taking the product, right? Like they're like, hey, those rats live longer. I want to live longer. Those rats didn't have tumors. I don't want to have tumors. So let me start taking it, you know, some could even argue prematurely. And so they're taking it and then calling us without any real opportunity for the placebo effect and saying, it does this, it does that, it's beneficial here, I feel better, I move faster, I feel younger, like all of these things. And most consistently, I sleep better. So that's everything that was coming back. And really, it wasn't until 2018 that we even kind of added, hey, you might experience this while you're taking the product. And so I think to go to the marketing side of things, if I just come to you, and we have a lot of time and your audience is kind of very open-minded, but most importantly, I think we have a lot of time to kind of share the story and open people's minds and let this information seep in. I think if I just went on to like a commercial and said, hey, I have this product and the research behind it says it could help you live twice as long, where's your skepticism factor there?
Yeah. So what you're saying is that if we get to the year 2045 and I'm 103 years old, then you might raise your eyebrows and say there's probably something to it. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's probably people's feelings. And then it goes one step farther, which is even, I don't know, disappointing, disheartening, whatever word you want to put on it. I share that story with people. First off, if they can get past like, okay, maybe it can help me live longer. Okay, let's just accept that. Then the next response is, why would I want to live longer? And this is like 98% of the people that we talk to share that they're not really interested in living longer. And then I say, okay, like I get it. I think I know what's going on here. If you had the same mental capacity as you do today, or you had the same physical capacity as you do today, would you be interested in living longer? And the answer is not 100% yes. So maybe some people need to reevaluate their lives and people in their lives, but it goes up significantly. So now 90% of people are interested in living longer as long as they have the same mental capacity and physical capacity. Because again, the mindset is we get old, we need the walker in the oxygen tank that the rats didn't have in that original study.
I see. So this is why you can have the rat studies, but you haven't embarked on a human study on longevity.
Well, yeah, I think, one of the challenges with the human study, and frankly, I think we could get it pushed through, is a typical human study is a couple months and a couple $1 million, right? Maybe a couple years and a couple $1 million. We're looking at a study, if the average human lives 90% longer, they're going to live to age 152. The average person. That's not like, oh, someday we'll get there. If we just mirror what happened in this study, and we could debate like what are the chances that's going to happen. But if we just mirrored what happened in the study, then the average human's 152. Like, what is the cost associated with that study? That's one of the big challenges. Now, I'm looking at where are the opportunities to do some human trials? Where are the opportunities to do some studies that can support what our customers are saying? And so far, the best one that we have is is the Oura ring study. So for those who are watching and can see, I'm holding up an Oura ring. It's really a plastic ring. It's got some sensors inside of it. It can keep track of my temperature, my movements, and my heart rate. And it's one of the better sleep trackers on the market. We're working with a professor out of the University of California, San Diego. His name's Benjamin. He's a consultant for Oura ring, so has access to the backside data of the Oura ring. And so we started right before COVID, we started a sleep study, and we're still moving it forward inch by inch. The problem is that this Oura ring has been kind of flagged as a potential COVID early warning system. So if you've got an Oura ring, you can participate in a study, and they're getting some good results that you can identify early if you've got COVID. Now, you can imagine the difference between our little tiny C60 Evo sleep study and the fact that the world is looking for indicators. And so he's overwhelmed, like as much as we are overwhelmed by the changes that have happened in our society, he has those changes, and everyone's leaning on him to say, like, is this data real? Does this data work? How do we do it? I think the NBA even authorized their basketball players to use Oura ring as one of the indicating factors of, whether they can play a game.
Oh, and how does that relate to ESS60? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I got lost
so
in
the
that.
Oura ring, we're doing a study with them, right?
Oh.
We're doing a study with Benjamin. Again, he's a University of California, San Diego professor who is a consultant for Oura ring. We started this right before COVID. It was one of the reasons that study is just frankly, is going to drag on for a long time, is because he's underwater with all the COVID research associated with the Oura ring. But I think it's a testament to the value of the data Oura ring collects and the value of the study that we're going to get out of this process. But I mean, in general, like are we going to do a 152-year study, or are we going to do, a 40-day sleep study, on C60 Evo, off C60 Evo sleep study?
Right. Now, here is a set of data that interests me, and perhaps the people out there might be interested, but I'd like to hear it. Let's go over to the materials that C60 was put in and why, that you mentioned earlier. I heard ink, but you mentioned a bunch of other stuff of industrial materials. Could you go through those industrial materials, mention why C60 was put in there, and what good things happened to the industrial materials after you put C60 in them?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and can you extrapolate over to humans? I mean, I'm just asking.
Yeah, I can do some of that, right? So C60, again, C60 is for industrial applications. ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for safer human consumption. When we talk about C60 and we're talking about putting it in batteries, putting it in inks, putting it in solar cells, we can talk about some of the properties. Let's kind of roll back just a little. C60 was discovered in 1985. For those who are watching, I'm actually holding up a chemical model of the C60 atom. And if you're not watching, you can just imagine a soccer ball, where the soccer ball on the line the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have this spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. It's actually got six-fold symmetry. So there's 6 planes through this buckyball through which it has symmetry. What that does is it makes it an incredibly resilient molecule. In fact, it's called a buckyball because it's named after Buckminster Fuller. And I think you have an experience with Buckminster Fuller, Alfred, at some point. But it's named after Buckminster Fuller because it has the shape of the geodesic dome, which is a shape that Buckminster Fuller brought to the forefront in architecture. And here, like, I'm in Houston, so when we go down to Galveston by the beach, that's kind of where we mostly see these geodesic dome beach houses. So they're just houses that are domed. Those are geodesic dome beach houses. So this molecule spherical has got 6-fold symmetry. It's actually so resilient that if you fire it at a plate of steel at 15,000 miles an hour, most molecules would just shred apart. Like if you took sugar, if you took caffeine, whatever, those molecules would just shatter. the buckyball just compresses and bounces right back. So it's incredibly resilient. It's in terms of kind of initial, and we'll still put them in the realm of science fiction, but absolutely possible. I think that's the best kind of science fiction, right? Is the molecule is actually big enough for any atom on the periodic chart to fit inside of it. So there's a new symbol in chemistry, the @ symbol, which we're familiar with it from the email, our email addresses, but the @ symbol didn't exist in chemistry prior to the existence, the known existence, or that publication of in the Nature publication of this discovery. The @ symbol didn't exist in chemistry. And so lanthanum at C60 means lanthanum is physically trapped inside the cage of C60. So it's not ionically bonded to the exterior. It's not covalently bonded to the exterior. It's actually physically trapped inside of it. So some of the things that they suggested early on is that you could put inside of the buckyball a radioactive molecule. Because the buckyball is so resilient, it would actually hold its shape, right? It wouldn't be deteriorated by the actual radiation off of those atoms. And then you could attach something to the outside, that kind of a protein that kind of causes it to attach to a cancer cell. So now you've got a radioactive payload that, because of the chemistry on the exterior of the buckyball, has attached to a cancer cell. You're delivering radiation to cancer cells. And so that was theorized in the early 90s. I think there might even be a patent related to it. That patent has probably since been issued and expired, because the process of getting molecules, atoms inside of the buckyball is a non-trivial process. So another thing to kind of recognize about how important this particular molecule is that they assumed it was like a 3D version of benzene. So you've got one of the sides of this is like a benzene ring. Benzene is ubiquitous in our society. We don't have modern society without benzene. If you just kind of look around your room, what is made of plastic in your room? Without benzene, without the benzene ring, all of that goes away. And then you start talking about a lot of medicines, detergents. We don't have modern society without the benzene ring. If you're saying that this buckyball is like a 3D version of benzene, what you're saying is it's going to be ubiquitous in society. It's as important as the benzene ring. And that's really why those initial discoverers, Dr. Smalley, Dr. Kroto, and Dr. Curl, actually won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the molecule. So it's amazing molecule. Now, one of the things that's pretty amazing about it, it can actually hold electrons. So it can actually hold about 6 electrons on the exterior of the cage, and then release those electrons again, because of the symmetry, without being causing detrimental physical problems, damage to the actual exterior of the cage. Now, a negative electron that comes and attached to it is very similar to a reactive oxygen species in the body. So that's what gives it that's the theory, that is what gives it its antioxidant capability. So that's kind of like, you want to take something that's practical application, the fact that it holds and releases electrons without damage, it can grab onto and release reactive oxygen species in our body, oxidation in our body, to prevent oxidation in our body. So it's a pretty amazing molecule.
Wow. But does it make, inks cooler or rubber greater, or
yes,
what does it do?
It does, right? So in terms of, if you think about carbon black and what it does in tires, the presence of the buckyball actually makes it more UV. Really, the carbon black is in there, and why our tires are black is because it protects those tires from the sun. The presence of the buckyball in those, the industrial version C60 in the tires, actually improves its ability to fight the ravages of radiation. Now, you ask, okay, great, if it improves it, why isn't it in tires now? There's lots of tires. We could make lots of buckyballs. And the reason is the improvement isn't worth the cost. Currently, and we can talk about the manufacturing process of this, but currently this material is so very expensive that the gains in the tire aren't worth the cost that it would that you would incur for including the buckyball in it. Paints too, they stick better. Inks, like from from your printer, they stick better. They're darker. Like it makes better materials in those particular applications.
So extrapolating it to the human being, to the human applications in ESS60, and I'll make a gross generalization, which you can shoot down. That's why I make generalization. By internalizing the buckyball through ESS60, you're making a better human being.
Well, I certainly feel that I'm better, and we look at some of the testimonials that we get, and again, we could just attribute it to better sleep, right? Because if you're better mentally, physically, and emotionally, then you're going to feel better. You're a better human if you're better physically, mentally, and emotionally. I think you're better in terms of this is what humans would like to be. They'd like to be better physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so, yeah, that can move you in the direction. And better sleep can, like, there's lots of things. This isn't the only thing. There's lots of things that can move you in that direction. A better diet can make you feel better mentally, physically, and emotionally. Exercise, like consistent exercise, again, better physically, mentally, and emotionally. And then that sleep, which is one of our most consistent testimonials, again, better physically, mentally, and emotionally. I like it though. We could just say making better, C60 Evo, making better humans.
Right. Would that fly over the regulators?
It could. I might be, because I think we've had conversations about nanobots and the concern people have over mind control with the buckyball, which I think we talked about, and I proved like that's not even possible. It's not even in the realm of possibility. Other than that, like I don't think that the FDA is interested in trying to figure out what anyone means by saying you're a better human.
Right, or a better functioning human. I mean,
yeah.
Now, when was the buckyball discovered?
It was discovered in 1985, and it was here in Houston at Rice University. And again, the professors were Dr. Smalley, Dr. Curl, and Dr. Croto.
So does that account why the buckyball is not standard equipment in the current version of Homo sapiens? I mean, I'm just kind of asking. These are naive questions. You'll have to excuse me. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a scientist.
That's a good question. So I think maybe if I can spin it a little bit, which is like how novel, how new is this? Like, did it exist before they discovered it, right? Because there are some things, plastics didn't exist before they discovered it. They were made in a lab. You can actually find carbon-60 if you take a candle and you take the flame off of a candle and you collect the soot. Usually use like a cold plate to collect the soot off of a candle. You can get parts per million, parts per billion of C60 in there, and that's like the good kind of, we would call that ESS60 because of some of the properties that it has. So it's naturally occurring. We've all had some microscopic is not small enough of a word, right? So nanoscale is significantly lower than microscope. Microscopes can barely even see at nanoscale. So we've had nano exposure to C60, like all of us. And so what's interesting is when you go to the lab, say there's a peptide or a testosterone that's in your body, a hormone that's in your body, and you go to the lab and you try and make it. One of the things about organic chemistry, the process of making things in the lab, is that you could have something like if you added something to the buckyball and it like curved to the right and had, a couple H's and a couple O's and a couple carbons in it. If you made the same thing and it curved the other way, its properties can be dramatically different, right? So the fact that it's made in a lab and has the same exact composition doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have the same effect in your body. When it comes to carbon 60, when it comes to the ESS60 molecule, it's 60 carbon atoms, and there really is only one configuration of 60 carbon atoms that works, that makes a cage, and that turns into the ESS60 molecule. So whether you collect one of these out of a soot of candle or one of them from our reactor, one is one is one. It's not like one is kind of like one. It's not like, you know, laboratory peptides are kind of like peptides found in our body. It's this buckyball is the same as the one we sell to you, the same as the one that's in soot, the same as the one that's been proven to be in space, the same as the one that's proven to be in the KT boundary. So the KT boundary is a layer around the Earth that's associated with when the asteroid crashed, and kind of the same time that the dinosaurs went extinct. And that KT boundary is known to have a higher concentration of C60. So that's the same C60 that's in our C60 Evo product.
Wow. So would you say that ESS60 science and awareness in consumer society as well as scientific society is in its infancy worldwide? Is it consumed in countries in any appreciable amount other than the United States, or is it principally in the United States now and just kind of dribbling out around the world? I mean, where do things stand now?
Yeah, so the biggest volume by far, and again, we're the largest manufacturer and distributor of ESS60 on the planet. So we know the biggest consumer by far is the United States. Now this and the path of who consumes the next is actually associated with the national GDP. So you start getting into UK, Canada is a big consumer, and then you get into like Australia. And then Europe in general, actually probably before Australia. So your first question is it in its infancy? Both from the materials perspective, from the C60 industrial application, and from the ESS60 molecule, like people using the product as a supplement. And the answer is both, unequivocally both. Like if you look at the search volume, and I look at these things, I'm trying to figure out how to generate awareness of the product. If you look at the search volume for ESS60 versus the search volume for CBD, there's about 550,000 searches per month for CBD. There's about 10,000 searches per month for ESS60. So you're talking like a 55-fold larger market, right? So everybody we can kind of say that, you know, there's always that one-off person who's like, oh, I never heard of CBD. Like, what rock are you living under is the question usually. Everybody knows about CBD. Nobody knows about ESS60. And that's why, like, I'm on this podcast with you and hoping that your audience, whether you know, whatever their kind of openness is to this, one, tries it, and then two, shares it with some people.
Right. Of course, there's a large culture. There's a large cannabis culture that goes back thousands of years.
Yes.
That behind the CBD.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, is there any ESS60 awareness in Russia? Because they're generally kind of ahead of the curve on things.
Yeah, so through the years, again, we've been doing this since 1991, manufacturing and distributing carbon nanomaterials. And one of the things that we do is kind of be aware of what kind of derivatives are available. And Russia has been our supplier for derivatives of C60. Let's be really clear about that. And actually, I'd have to check with Robert. He's more on the kind of industrial side. But I do think there have been times where we've purchased maybe some indihedrofulleranes to check and see if that might be viable to bring to the market. But ultimately, we make our stuff in-house, and so that's talking about the industrial side. if you look at market share, the market share, my awareness of the market in Russia is teeny tiny.
Right, right. So, so what do you think is going to lead up to the inevitable aha moment for ESS 60? I mean, we're sort of the pioneers out there, and the pioneers of a better human, and everybody's talking about a better human that is not the transhumanist human, because nobody wants to become the better robot. We want to become the better human with a divine soul. So let's be clear that ESS 60 lets you become a better human and keep your divine soul and connection to the divine. That's, to me, that is that is the advantage. Now, so these are very speculative questions, you understand, but I am a futurist, and
Yeah.
our audience loves these kind of questions and answers.
Yeah, well,
So,
and I think it's a fair question. I mean, you talk about pioneers in the industry, right? So my company is a pioneer in the industry. We're the first company that still exists to deliver commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials. That's the definition. I believe that fits the definition of pioneers for an industry. We were used in so our product was used in the original rat study, that supposed toxicity study that turned out to be the longest longevity experiment on mammals known to man. And our company's actually mentioned in that particular study. So pioneers. I look around at what other companies that we could say. In some cases, I've looked at those concentrations. So the concentrations of C60 in their case, or ESS60 in our case, in our product. And I hesitate to call them competitors, but for the sake of this discussion, I've looked at the landscape of our competitors, and all of them are out there, in my opinion, trying to make a fast buck. Hey, there's C60, we can mix it in oil. We don't have the equipment to kind of prove what we have, but we can certainly turn around and sell it and people will buy it, right? That's what's happening. That's the opposite of pioneers, in my opinion. I'm the one who's out as the kind of face of the industry, trying to grow this industry, trying to make people aware of really all of this. And I'll get into kind of, I think this is an interesting story. Like, I'm not supposed to be a supplement guy. Like, I think people become supplement guys one of two ways, right? Guys or gals. One is they wake up and they decide they want to be wealthy, and they decide they're going to do that by selling supplements. And I have no problem with people being wealthy. My goal is to someday be wealthy, but that's not how I ended up here. The other is, I think people have their own kind of physical problems, maybe physical problems of a loved one, and they do all this research and they find a supplement solution, a solution with supplements, and now they want to change the world. Hopefully it doesn't surprise you. I have no problem with people wanting to change the world. It's just not how I ended up here. I've been manufacturing the raw ingredients since 1991, selling it to research institutions around the world since 1991. They do this crazy toxicity study in 2012, and now I'm a supplement guy. Like, it's not what I decided to do, it's what fell in my lap. And as an entrepreneur, I've always dreamed of being an entrepreneur. I'm just trying to shepherd this product well. And so I'm the one who's out, like, pushing the envelope, trying to generate awareness of. Mostly what drives me and keeps me moving every day is the fact that we get all these amazing testimonials. I have conversations with you, Alfred, and you're like, oh, this has changed in my life. I'm able to handle this better. Like, how lucky am I that I get to be out and about talking about something that's having such a positive impact on everybody's life. And then, like, we also have a pet product. So we get testimonials about people, hey, my cat's better, my dog's better. I've got 2 testimonials where the vet told these 2 separate people, take your cat home, it's dead, like, it's dying. And they got on our product, and this is more than a year later, the cat's still with them. And actually, it's not just laying there, it's actually up and running around again.
wow. Well, that is a beautiful that is a beautiful sort of picture with which to uh, come to the closing sort of minutes of our segment here. Could you once again tell people where they can go to begin to access ESS60 and what the various options are for them once they get there?
Absolutely. So we've got 3 flavors. We've got olive oil, we've got MCT oil, and we've got avocado oil. We most recommend olive oil. In fact, sometimes when people order MCT, we actually call them and say, are you sure? Because the concentration of this ESS60 molecule inside the olive oil version is so much higher than the other products. So you get about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter. And avocado, that's the next one, you get about 0.65 milligrams per milliliter. And then in MCT oil, it's the lowest concentration. It's 0.3, 0.35. So we definitely recommend the olive oil. When you go to our website, c60evo.com, by the way, C60evo kind of stands for the evolution of C60 into ESS60, right? That's the C60 that's been processed for safer human consumption. You can find our bottles and we can find our bottles on subscription. We give a 20% discount when they're on subscription. So make sure you take advantage of that. You can cancel a subscription at any time. There's no problem canceling. We haven't trained our staff to talk you out of canceling. You can cancel, not a problem, but take advantage of that 20% discount. And then there's also a code, and Alfred, if you could give, I think you probably have that code, and that's good for a 5% discount or something. I can't remember what the discount is on your code.
Yes, right. They get an additional 5% discount, and you all have really, you're a sponsor of our channel, Exopolitics TV. So 15% of the purchase actually comes to sponsor the activities of Exopolitics TV. So we're very grateful for that. So there's this wheel of transmission and prosperity that happens all the way around.
And what's that code? Because they have to use the code.
The code is ALWSPEC. ALWSPEC.
And so it's ALW and then special SPEC. Okay.
Yeah.
And that'll give them that extra discount. Make sure that you get credit so that we're supporting Exopolitics. And feel free, we've got a form on the site. If you've got questions, we've got staff that can answer your questions. You can call in. We've got staff that can answer your questions. And frankly, if the question gets kind of too technical or whatever, you may end up on the phone with me.
There you go. Well, we're very, very grateful for your joining us again. We look forward to your joining us in the future.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for this extremely informative session. I even learned what C60 does in industrial materials and how it makes the better human. And I actually asked it and got answered in a safe way.
I'm gonna do one more thing, share with you one more thing just to kind of blow your mind. This molecule that I'm holding up, right? So this ESS60 molecule, if you're going to consume it, is the largest molecule that exhibits quantum behavior.
Wow.
Right? So go kind of look up quantum behavior and what the slit test is. By the way, I'm not a quantum expert. I know enough to make that statement and maybe 3 more. But go look it up and you'll understand what the ramifications of quantum behavior and the fact that this is the largest molecule yet to exhibit quantum behaviors is pretty phenomenal.
Well, on that note, we're going to ask you a lot of questions next time about quantum behavior.
I'll do more reading.
Okay, then. Yeah. So we'll see you soon, and hang on because we'd like to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Good enough then.